You're listening to Mississippi Outdoors Radio on the JT Show. Mississippi Outdoors Radio on the JT Show is presented by the Foundation for Mississippi Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. The Foundation supports projects associated with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks to protect and preserve Mississippi's wonderful wildlife heritage for generations to come.
Riding through the bayou, headed for the sky blue, back out on the trail again and again. Hiking and hunting and fishing the land, time is time well spent. We'll take it to the Delta, to the gray and white shores. There's so much
Mississippi Outdoors Radio on Super Talk Mississippi, part of the JT Show every Monday morning. And in studio with us, we have, as always, Adam Butler, wildlife biologist. How are you today?
Trying to stay dry. Again.
This is the wrong week to be trying that.
I would like to have like maybe 3 straight days of the sunshine with no rain.
That's unreasonable.
Well,
it's not going to happen.
3 days.
As warm as it is, if you got 3 straight days of sunshine with all the moisture, then you'd have to get your lawnmower out.
Yeah. We've got flowers at my house trying to bloom,
Me too.
Chris.
Those winter weeds
It's
and
ridiculous.
stuff.
They're
Yeah.
so confused.
Trees are
right
starting
now.
to bud.
Yeah, I don't know what to do about it. I got an orange tree we planted in the yard. It's got buds all over it. I'm like, this is not going to end well.
We saw at church
no.
yesterday. I saw a green ash tree there in the front of the church with leaves on it, already putting on
Yeah,
leaves.
well, I saw one
Leaves.
budding the last couple of weekends of January. I was deer hunting, and there was a tree behind me. I think it was an ash, but they were budding, completely budding. Unbelievable.
That's Major Chris Reed with the Law Enforcement Bureau with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, who always joins us. And in the middle, because it is Management Month, the return of Mr. John Grushey. How are you?
Oh, doing well. Thank
Back
you.
by popular demand.
Yes.
we had a lot of positive feedback. Had to
He's
get him back.
insightful. He's educated. He's well spoken. He
Renowned
is
throughout the South.
radio material.
Don't build it up.
He speaks for 2 segments that you guys don't have to.
Yeah.
Hey,
I'm just saying. Come on.
hey.
Come on, Major. I've just called it like it is.
Oh, we love Grucci.
He,
We love him.
well, he's knowledgeable. He knows this stuff. We found that out last week. Now, before we get to the Management Month stuff, we have some other things, some house cleaning to do, right, Adam?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I guess wanted to mention the North Mississippi Special Extended Deer Season. It's over now, folks. So put the guns up. It was just one weekend, so it's done. I don't know if John was there. You want to elaborate?
Oh, yeah,
any?
Ground Zero. Yeah, man, I tell you what, it was a hard weekend. The hunters, I don't know that we had a ton of participation. It was probably moderate participation, but I feel like we had really good compliance with the sampling requirement. We probably took in a little over 400 samples, and some of those are still trickling in from taxidermists and things like that. So, I'll tell you this: it was a lot of hard work, but the hunters that I interacted with, it was they were really committed to the surveillance efforts, and it was a privilege to work in that condition.
And Major, let me ask you, because we had a text on the C Spire text line. They said, just wondering how many people got caught not returning a sample. Did you have any of that?
Not to my knowledge. In direct regards to that statement, there were some cases made. From what I've heard, I haven't seen any reports or anything along those lines, but there were some people who may have extended the actual zone that deer hunting was allowed in this weekend. And when I say that, I mean they were hunting illegally. They were hunting in areas where they deemed it appropriate and not us. And then we may have had some transportation cases where people failed to adhere to the transportation regulations that we have in place.
Shot it in one area, took it to another one.
Yeah, right, correct. Leaving the CWD zone. So the compliance was good as far as putting in samples. And as Grucci had said earlier today, not on the show, but they were very excited to get some county-level data, some county-level goals in certain counties that they really wanted to get some samples in, and they achieved that. And so they were happy with it. And if they're happy with it, we're happy with it.
And that was the goal of this entire thing, Adam, was to get the data, get more information, so that you know what to do.
I know there was a little negative feedback out there that we heard, and I think we had a caller or something a couple of weeks ago, but that's really what it was all about, extending the season to get more CWD samples in so that we can reach our our goals statewide and our goals in those particular counties. And John and I were looking at the map before we came over here. We're pretty much the northern 2/3 of the state. There's a couple of counties that aren't quite to the goal, but we're pretty close on all of those. The southern, very southern part of the state, we still need to pick up a few more here and there, but most of the northern and central Mississippi, we're where we'd like to be.
Do you think part of that is because in the southern part of the state they're not as focused on this, they're not as concerned because it's a north part of the state problem in their mind?
That may be a fair statement.
I don't think that's too far of a shot to try to perceive that. I mean, that's human nature, right? Yeah. If it's not up close and personal, it's not really my problem. And so, we can urge and encourage folks to take those samples down there, and hopefully it stays contained to where it is now and it doesn't spread. And but we do desperately, and we got 5 days left in that southeast zone till February 15th. So you got a week, basically 5 days to get some samples in down there in that world, and we'd love them. We need them.
And deer densities aren't nearly as high in that part of the state as they are in other parts of the state. So there's not as many deer being taken. So that's probably part of it as well.
Yeah, but it's important to get samples from the areas where it hasn't spread to yet. That's Otherwise, you don't know exactly where that line is.
That's right. It's like playing Battleship. We want to know where the white pins are. Yeah.
Great reference.
I was not expecting that reference, John, but that was a good one. I agree. That was a very good one. Yeah. Waterfowl.
Yeah, just wanted to mention kind of like the special deer season that happened this past weekend. We also had our youth waterfowl camp, which has been really popular of late. I got a little bit of feedback from the guys that were there. They had a really good group that spent the weekend learning about ducks, learning about wetlands, learning about moist soil habitat and that management, and even got to do a little duck hunting during that special Saturday youth season. So always, we always love doing stuff for kids and for the next generation, and that's been a great event for a number of years. I don't know how many, probably 5-6 years at least.
Oh, yeah.
And
went off well again. Just wanted to praise Houston and his group for the job they do on that camp. And a lot of partners involved in that.
Turkey season draw hunts. We talked
Turkey
about
season
that
draw
last
hunts.
week.
Yep. Just remind folks if you have not yet registered for the WMA draws, that ends. That registration period ends on the 15th, which is Saturday. So you better get on it. If you wait till the last minute, there's no loss there. Just get it in. So.
Where would you put in for if you had to pick?
Hardwood bottoms. Turkeys like the hardwood bottoms.
Yeah. When are we going to talk about turkeys? Before the season starts? First of
March? We may talk about turkeys a little bit today, but we'll get into it.
It's like
March.
A month.
I know. It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, it's time.
Then you won't see
just
him
kicking
anymore.
deer season off like yesterday, and now we're a month out from turkey. So.
Yeah, it's amazing how fast the time goes. You get so busy with what you're doing, and you look up and you go. And I had a buddy of mine that made the comment the other day, said, I cannot believe deer season's over.
I know. Like you still want to go hunt it. Like it's not set in yet.
Yeah. Now, adding to that confusion is the fact that it feels like September outside. So, who knows what time of the year it is at this point. You can't judge it, from certainly the way the weather is outside. Now, one other thing, goose.
Yeah, so worth mentioning, this is really the only time of the year where we get a lot of interest in it or much interest at all. But, we're past now any other waterfowl opportunity. So the regular waterfowl season ended, and the special youth veterans special day is now past us. But we do have some waterfowl opportunity with the light goose conservation season. So the Fish and Wildlife Service has allowed the states to have an extended season on essentially snow geese. And there's some conservation issues there. Snow geese populations are extremely abundant, and they've kind of been damaging their breeding habitat way up around the Arctic Circle. And so because of that, we've liberalized the opportunity to try to take some of that population. So you do have to apply for that. There's no permit to it, but the federal folks that we work with would like to know who's participating that season. So you can do that online. And pretty much most of the normal waterfowl regulations apply. There's a couple of differences with the light goose season, right? I think you can use electronic callers.
You can. You don't have to have a plug in your shotgun. You can hunt till 30 minutes after dark.
Right.
So, and there's no limit. There's no possession. You can shoot as many as you want to tote out.
That was going to be my question. Was what was the bag limit on them? Nothing.
Whatever you can carry.
Stack them high and deep.
You got to get them out of the field, though. You can't leave them out there. You got to make an effort to recover.
And so this is and like I said, it sounds crazy, but it's actually there's a conservation issue behind that's trying to be addressed through use of the gun, which is going to get us at what we're talking about today: the match, axe, cow, plow, and gun, managing wildlife.
Well, luckily, the guy that is intimately familiar with board games is here to help us explain this.
You got it.
This is perfect. We started out with Battleship, and now we're going to the new game here, dealing with Management Month. John Gruchy will take over the show while all the rest of us are just going to go out for coffee while he talks to you for half an hour. In all seriousness, we'll get into Management Month and some information you might need to know here on Mississippi Outdoors Radio on Super Talk Mississippi next. And now, John, it's your time.
I'm so excited.
And we're gone. Good night. We'll just leave John here. Of course, it's Management Month for property management. And I walk in, and the title of your segment is Match, Axe, Cow, Plow, Gun.
That's it.
If you don't know what we're talking about after that.
Yeah, I think we covered it, didn't we?
Under.
Man.
We can't be accused of burying the lead here because that's right out front, except that I have no idea what that means.
Yeah, no. Well, I appreciate it. We tried to tantalize you there with that, just kind of an ambiguous lead. Basically, what that kind of phrasing comes from is Aldo Leopold. He was a gentleman who we consider to be the father of modern wildlife management. And, at the time when Leopold was writing, it was in the late 20s, early 30s, and many wildlife populations had been decimated. And he had been kind of called out of the dugout to go and figure out. He visited many states. He even came to Mississippi in 1927. And he did surveys, assessments, and looked at the best ways to manage the wildlife and bring it back from the verge of extinction in many cases in different species. And he wrote a book, and of course we're all required to read several of his books, but at least one or two through the course of wildlife school. And one of his quotes, he says, "Wildlife can be restored by the creative use of the same tools which have heretofore destroyed it: the axe, the cow, the plow, the match, and the gun." And what Leopold is getting at there is basically your tools for management. So last week we talked a lot about your goals and objectives. The first step in everything is goals and objectives. We got to figure out exactly what do you want, and that's critical. We can't overlook it. But once you figure out what you want, how do you get there? What are the prescriptions that you need? What are the activities? What are things that need to be completed? And we can boil a lot of that down into either population management or habitat management. And our habitat management tools are going to be that axe, roughly looking at timber harvest. What kind of trees are we taking out? Really what we're doing there is managing sunlight. We're also managing food resources and managing plant communities in general. The match, and in our case, Adam and I are both big prescribed fire guys. We're looking at prescribed fire. Is it appropriate on the area for your goal and objective? Is fire appropriate, or for the habitat that you're managing, maybe prescribed fire being a good tool? Or you might even look at it as fire exclusion if you have some places where you don't want to burn.
Well, and I'm going to jump in here for just a second because we've had in the news for months down in Australia all their wildfire problems. They came about because they passed a ban on prescribed burns.
Sure, yeah. I'm not intimately familiar with Australia's situation, but I can tell you that that's happened in the continental United States. Obviously in the 50s, we had the whole Smokey Bear movement, basically fire suppression. Fire is bad. And as a matter of fact, if you can go back not very far, if you get into even the turn of the century, European settlers were using prescribed fire. The Native Americans used prescribed fire. We had natural fires, obviously, that occurred at different frequencies when we didn't have interstate highways to block it off or houses to worry about being smoked in. Fires that might have started naturally burn for days. And so we have fire-dependent communities. There's some of these plant communities that have evolved to basically be driven by prescribed fire, and when it's there and when it's not. And so that's a pretty important one. One of the other tools, obviously, the cow we mentioned. So the cow seems to be weird to us. Of course, in the eastern United States, all wildlife biologists go to forestry school, and in the west, they all go to range management school. But basically, herbivory, animal herbivory, how many or how few cows you have in an area can be a thing. In the eastern United States now, we probably think a little bit more when we talk about the cow vegetation management. We're thinking about the sprayer, right, Adam? We're thinking about soil disturbance like the disc. We want herbicides to take out individual plants, disking and soil disturbance. Also, one that's not on there, the water control structure. You know, how are we managing flood pulses and things like that? Maybe the opposite of the match. And then, of course, the plow, that's what most people go right to. They think, what am I going to plant for wildlife? What are some of the things? But it could also be the plow could mean several different methods of cultivation besides just planting food plots. And then lastly, the gun, that population management being very important.
Well, and that's the thing is that, to me, the takeaway from this entire month and all the education that you're giving out here is, just like we said last week, this is not simple. It's not just, I'm going to buy a plot of land,
That's right.
we're good to go. And one thing that you mentioned talking about flood pulses, just like fire is not necessarily a bad thing, flooding isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Sure. It just depends. And we actually have, Houston, we just got through doing the waterfowl camp this past weekend, the youth waterfowl camp. They do a whole section in there on waterfowl management, and that's the management of water. You know, how are we going to manipulate flooding, the timing, the duration, the frequency? Those things all result in different plant communities. So it's really important. And everything that we've talked about previously obviously is all context dependent. So you don't want to, I talk a lot about timber harvest. There are people who wouldn't dream of having timber harvest. It depends on what your goals and objectives are. Last week we talked about aesthetics being very important to some people. So when we start talking about cutting timber, it makes their hackles get up. They don't really care for timber harvest discussion. But at the end of the day, for instance, if your goal is managing for white-tailed deer, the two things that are going to be most important to you, we look at what we would call their population vital rates, and the most important thing is going to be that adult doe survival, so you're managing their populations with the gun. But then the second most important thing is going to be the maternal effects of that doe. Is she gestating? When she's gestating and lactating, what type of nutrition is available to her? When that buck is growing their antlers, producing antlers in the summertime, what type of nutrition is available? What are we filling their bellies with? And all that, that's just a mathematical equation, basically. You got energy from the sunlight, nutrients in the soil, and water. You add all that, and it makes browse. And what plants we have available and how much sunlight, how well the soil is managed is going to be critical for that browse.
Now, we have, pardon my use of the phrase, some wackos out there that think that the best way to handle any type of wildlife management or property management is to just never touch it. Don't do, oh my goodness, you can't do anything like that. But the problem with that is all of these things that you're talking about are replacing natural things that don't necessarily happen the same anymore.
Sure. And that's, that debate is old as FDR and John Muir, right? Or not FDR, I'm sorry, the other Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt. I got the wrong Roosevelt. Teddy and Muir basically had that debate back and forth. And then the guy that we mentioned earlier, Aldo Leopold, he was a conservationist. And conservation just represents the wild use, the wise use, whereas preservation is kind of what you're talking about, hands off.
So John and I have the benefit of almost like a century of science on managing
That's
wildlife and how wildlife interact with their environment and that kind of thing. Aldo Leopold was really, what he was just a great, phenomenal naturalist. And so he was looking at systems that were still intact, systems that hadn't been messed with too much by humans, and he was noticing the patterns in there. And that's where he came up with all these 5 different things: gun, match, cow, axe, plow. The reality is, what you're getting at, Dave, is that there's not a whole lot of places that are untouched. In most places, the natural system has already been manipulated somehow or another. So it's our responsibility to, recharge these natural processes that would normally manage.
You have
the
to
land.
compensate for the changes that have already happened.
That's right.
And get it back to the natural state of equilibrium.
That's right. So all we're trying to do is sort of do what probably historically happened naturally, but we're trying to do it our own way in a controlled way that suits our purposes.
Sure. Yeah. We sometimes we'd say there's no analog for what we're currently. Obviously that past can't necessarily be recreated, but we do have the as Adam said, the benefit of science, and we know based on what your goals and objectives are as a landowner, some of those processes that may fit best into that management style.
Well, and that's the thing. Again, it goes back to the very first thing you taught us last week. You've got to have a plan.
Sure.
To have a plan, you've got to have a goal.
That's right.
Which is the first thing that you have to establish, because things are going to work different ways based on what goal you're trying to achieve.
That's right. Yeah. So we're going to manage deer differently than we might manage bobwhites, than we might manage wild turkey. So you got to look at, obviously, population management like we talked about in deer, and then depending on your species, and deer is going to be one, also turkey, they're going to have a bottleneck somewhere in that annual cycle. And we want to direct that management, that match, axe, plow, cow. We want to try to get to that limiting factor. What is limiting? Is it browse? Is it cover in the case of the bobwhites many times? Or specifically in case of wild turkey, it may be nesting and brood rearing cover. So we want to try to address those things with our management.
It's Mississippi Outdoors Radio. John Gruchy. It's Management Month for property management. And when we come back, let's get into some specific examples of the way this might work for certain types of animals and certain goals that you might be trying to achieve with your property. We'll do that as we continue with Mississippi Outdoors Radio on Super Talk Mississippi next. But John, we're getting back to property management here. And as I said before the break, I want to get into some specifics. For example, deer. Let's say you're starting up a property. You don't know what to do, but that's your goal. You want it to be good for deer.
Sure. So taking those principles we talked about, the match, axe, plow, cow, and gun, first and foremost, like I was talking about, those population vital rates, we want to manage that population. So how many animals you take off of that property is directly related to how much groceries you're going to have. And also that adult doe survival is going to determine a lot of your reproduction and your population growth rates to some degree. And then again, secondly, is going to be body condition, so how much browse and how much groceries we're going to make for those animals. And so like I was saying earlier, basically you've got, X soil, and you want to make, you're manipulating sunlight. That's something you've got, obviously can't control the sun, but you can control the forest canopy and control how much sun gets to the ground. And then you can use these management practices like the match, fire, for instance, to drive that plant community composition. So how frequently or how the season you burn can determine what plants you have growing. And that determines nutrition in a couple of ways. You have some plants that manifest nutrients differently. For instance, dogwood tends to manifest calcium really well, especially in its older tissues. Whereas a lot of the protein that we talk a lot about, things like ragweed annual plants, will hold protein very well in their plant tissues. Some of the plants that get to be older and stemmy, they tend to be too lignified. Deer won't select those. So we want to do things like burning and disking to set back what we call plant succession and try to get younger and more tender plants and different species of plants, a diversity of plants, to have a diverse diet provided for those animals.
And that's what you could do with a prescribed burn. Prescribed
burning, and also the cow part of it, disking for us. That would be disking. We would use that, and then also the axe. Whenever you're coming in to make sunlight hit the ground, if you don't have an opening that you're managing, if you're managing the sunlight, you're going to have to go in and make some openings, either through thinning or even clear cutting in some cases. And trying to get some of that sunlight on the ground.
And one thing I think we need to underline here is that we're talking about the state of Mississippi, but the state of Mississippi isn't just one giant piece and it's all the same. It depends on where in the state.
Oh, yeah. We were talking about that actually before we rode over. I kind of live in the northeast near the Black Belt Prairie, and that's quite a bit of different soil, really a heavy clay dirt, almost like the buckshot of the Delta. And we have totally different plant community responses to the same practices than you will in the hills of, Marshall County, where you've got, kind of a sand hills, and then you get into the red clay of the of kind of the central hills of Mississippi, all the way down to the just pure old beach sand when you get south of 84. So totally different plant community responses. We talked a lot to people, throughout the Southeast, and burn rotations and burn recommendations that we make in Mississippi wouldn't fly in Texas, and they won't fly in, North Carolina. You've got to manage all that same thing with the state of Mississippi. North, south, east, west, you've got to be able to know about your soils and know about the plant communities that are going to be in your area.
And that's the thing that really, to me, makes this even more complicated than it looks like at first blush, because
Sure.
what works 100 miles up the road may not be what you need to do.
That's right, and don't mean to make that intimidating. Basically, all this stuff is, we joke about it all the time. It's kind of like how a college student learns how to cook a baked potato, right? You put it in the microwave till it blows up, and then the next time you don't put it in there that long. That's how you learn how to do some of this things. Sometimes you've got to mess up and figure things out.
Well,
Hopefully
and
those-
we mentioned
Yeah.
Aldo Leopold at the beginning. One of the things he always talked about was that wildlife management is both a science and an art. So
That's
there's-
right.
The science part of it is collecting data and trying to make patterns from the information you collect, but the art's kind of what you're getting at there.
That's
though.
right.
Just
That's
sort
right.
of a gut feel.
Little bit of trial and error involved in all that. And then also, we haven't talked about this very much, but it really comes down to the resources you have available. I talk a lot about prescribed fire. It's not going to be available to everybody because they're going to have a property right up against the interstate, or they're going to have a bottomland hardwood. And so they're going to be looking at different practices. They're going to have different tools available. Maybe your brother has a bulldozer or something like that, so you've got different options than somebody who doesn't. So all those things have to be experimented with, and you've really got to be able to think on your feet. And like I say, like we talked about last session, there's a team of knowledgeable people that are available to help you make decisions.
Well, and that's the big question. Once you've got your plan, you've identified your objectives, you know what you got to do. How do you do it?
That's right. That's right. So kind of moving through the chapters, like you said, last week we talked about figuring out goals and objectives so you can prioritize tasks. Now we're talking about with this segment today, we've talked a whole lot about basically your prescription. What am I going to do? What are the exact practices? And then lastly, it really comes down to what we would call implementation. How am I going to enact this prescription? How am I going to carry these things out? And so, again, you want to go through and figure out where your resources are, almost have an inventory, figure out what you have working for you and what you have working against. Talk to your private lands biologist like we talked about. In general, we do a survey of all of our landowners, and we say, look, we made some recommendations. About every 2 years we do a survey, and we say, look, in the last 2 years we came out, we made some recommendations. Did you do any of the things we said? And a lot of people say, yeah, we tried some of these things. And if we say, if not, what was your limiting factor? And almost overwhelming, what would you expect would be the limiting factor? What do you think people would say?
Well, to me, it would be a tie between money and time.
Money and time. I almost would always say money first. I would say people say, I don't have enough money. It's always time first. Every time
Really?
they'll say time, and then you know what the next thing is? Manpower. So they don't even necessarily, you don't always equate that with money. Certainly if you have tons of money, you can buy more manpower and probably even more time, buying somebody else's time. But at the end of the day, the thing that we try to do is help people avoid wasting time. We don't want to go down the road of an unproductive management strategy. And so once we get that goal and objective laid out, we get that management strategy in place, we want to try to do those best leveraging implementation strategies, the best leveraging stuff that we can do to make the most bang for our buck. And it goes back to following that plan and then hooking up with individual contractors maybe in some cases, or basically trying to gain competency in new skills. If you don't know how to prescribe burn, there's a way you can learn how to do that. If you don't know how to drive a tractor, there's an opportunity there to get a new skill set, and it helps you engage with your property that much more, right? Now, instead of the place that I just go to hunt, this is the place that I learned how to plant a food plot. This is the place that I learned how to prescribe burn. These are properties where, I planted that tree, all that kind of stuff. And so there's joys in that that sometimes get overlooked.
The dividends are so much better when you've invested.
Sure, that's right.
I was going to say, too, I think that's a phenomenon that's really changed a lot over the last 10 or 15 years or so, where people now, I think, get as much joy out of implementing wildlife management on their property as they do actually hunting. You see that more and more, that, it's kind of the off season that people really put a lot of thought into their
That's
place,
right.
and they get out and hunt when they have time, but what they really enjoy is managing the property and
That's right.
and watching the deer herd grow and change or whatever.
That's right. I've said that before. My son. So my grandfather grew up and farmed on the side. Right. He had a job in town and farmed on the side. His father, full-time farmer, whatever. But my dad, kind of the same thing. Moved into town, less interaction with the farm. My son, his only interaction is when we go and play around in the dirt and plant food plots. So that's valuable to me.
Very quickly, what can people do if they want to pick your brain? They need some help.
Sure,
What
sure.
can they do?
Yeah, go to our website, mdwfp.com/private lands. All one word, private lands. mdwfp.com/private private lands.
That's all you have to do, and the information is right there at your fingertips. Final segment of Mississippi Outdoors Radio on the way as Adam's phone continues to explode with commentary regarding his music choices. Notice that at the beginning of the segment. I love it. Final segment up next. And John, first of all, thanks. Great information as always.
Yeah, man, I thank you.
Great stuff. Adam, I don't know how you follow that. I'm going to be honest.
I'm still trying to recover from this 80s music thing.
Hey, you said it.
You did it to yourself. You said it in front of witnesses that have microphones. Never do that. It never
the
leads
whole
anywhere
hair
good.
band thing. It's kind of an iffy time.
Are you disparaging Motley Crue?
I'm just saying.
I bet you rocked
It's a
out
weird
to it.
style, you know.
Now that was a yes or no question. Are you
That's right.
disparaging Motley Crue?
You dodged it. You
He's
jabbed
trying.
out.
This week on Mississippi Outdoors TV,
Yeah, I see how
we're
this
going to
goes.
have a rerun. Going to be have a rerun, but it's going to be of the 2019 Governor's Quail Hunt with Governor
He is so
Phil Bryant.
shooketh. He's having trouble
Yeah.
getting through this.
Yeah. Going to be quail hunting down near Purvis with the governor, so take a look at that. And then after that, going to follow that up with a deer hunt at Cane Mount, WMA, near Port Gibson.
Very nice.
Yeah. So Mississippi Outdoors TV airs Thursday nights at 7:30 on Mississippi Public Broadcasting, and if you miss it, you can see it again at 5:30 on Saturdays. And then, as always, Chip posts all that stuff to our Facebook and YouTube and social media, so you can find it on the web.
Chip,
I actually went back and watched the Holmes County turkey hunt. I've watched that over the weekend on the YouTube. It was really good for those who didn't see it. As far as turkey hunts go, it was a good one.
They're up
With
close
old
and
Scotty
personal.
Jones. Oh yeah,
Close quarter combat.
back and forth in the palmettos.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Chip is good with that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And has great taste in music. Now, well, man, I'm not letting it go, Adam. I'm sorry. I'm just not letting it. I feel like you
Cue
kicked me in the shin.
80s hairband exit music, Rhino.
Maybe we can get Adam to sing along.
You know he knows the words.
Pull some Twisted Sister out. Come on. There's got to be something.
He had that was probably some of his motivational music when he was playing sports in high school, or his turkey jam.
Well,
for
yeah,
the
yeah, you're
year.
right. You know, AC/DC, I guess you could put them a little. You know, they kind of straddle the
wouldn't call them
70s,
hair
80s. So
band,
you know, they're a good one.
Yeah, not a
They're
hair
good one.
band, but they were an 80s rock band.
Yeah,
That would work.
That's solid.
Yeah.
Guns N' Roses. Solid.
This weekend, you could probably implement some of those old hairband ballads for Friday night, Valentine's Day.
Yes. Come on. Come on.
I like what
Yeah.
you did there, Reed.
Got to tie it back in. Got to bring it.
Weaved it on in there.
Yeah, that's a mark of a true professional right there is what that is. If you don't mind, I just want to take this opportunity right here at the end to talk about something going on tomorrow for JT.
Sure.
JT, as you know, he's in the hospital in intensive care. We appreciate all the prayers and support, both us here at TeleSouth and his family. Well, tomorrow, blood drive for JT at Broadmoor Baptist Church in Madison from 9 until 3, but it's not just there. If you're in the Jackson Metro, go to Broadmoor Baptist Church in Madison. Everywhere else in the entire state, Mississippi Blood Services, your local location, the one closest to you, just go in, tell them you're donating in the name of JT. And that takes care of it. Doesn't matter where you're at, on the coast, up in the Delta, up anywhere in the state. You can go to msblood.com, or you can download their free mobile app and find a location near you. That's tomorrow. And, of course, again, if you're in the Jackson metro area, roughly, Broadmoor Baptist Church in Madison from 9 till 3, they started all of this. I want to make sure they get full credit. That is going on tomorrow. And, you know, it's a weird time. It's a very stressful time. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of uncertainty still going on day to day. If you saw the Facebook post that his daughter made over the weekend, it's a serious situation, and that's why we're taking it so seriously. So, hated to butt in on Mississippi Outdoors Radio, but he's been a big part of it for a while.
Completely appropriate.
Worthwhile
Completely
calls.
appropriate. We need to continue to pray for his family and pray for their comfort and healing during this time, and people across the state, you know, step up and donate blood here in the metro area, and also all around the state. It's too easy not to, you know, they've made it too easy for you to go and do this, and so if they call him for it, just go do it.
That's all it takes. You can do it at your local Mississippi Blood Services location anywhere in the state of Mississippi.
And the blood drive at Broadmoor ends at 3?
Yes, 9 until 3 tomorrow at Broadmoor Baptist Church in Madison is when that's going on. And like I said, they started this whole thing. They put together this blood drive, and then it just kind of steamrolled from there. It expanded. So I want to make sure they get full credit. They are the ones that started this and came up with this idea, and we cannot thank them enough for coming up with this idea and getting it going. That's a huge help, and there is no such thing as a small help at this point. Even just sharing a good thought, that goes a long way, and it counts. Well, we're out of time for... I don't think he can hear it. You got to put your headset on there, Adam. There you go.
That's what I'm talking about.
There you go. Mississippi Outdoors Radio. I would ask him more questions, but Adam's got to do some headbanging before he gets out of the room. It'll be back again next Monday. And will we continue Project Management Month next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know we'll have John back, but we're going to have another management topic.
Fantastic. Program Management, Property Management Month continues next week on Mississippi Outdoors Radio. Enjoy it, guys, as always. Tomorrow, join us live at Nandy's Candy in Jackson for Valentine's Week with the JT Show. I'll see you then.